Hey everyone, this is Nathan here from NQ Productions, and welcome back to...
Do you remember?
So, a little while ago, I made a poll on my YouTube community tab asking you guys what you wanted to see me cover in episode 4 of Do You Remember? And over 70% of you wanted to see me talk about old Teletoon shows, so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, some of you may be wondering, what's Teletoon? Well, for those of you that don't know, Teletoon, known nowadays as Cartoon Network Canada, was the main cartoon channel for Canadians like myself. Rather than growing up on TV shows that aired on American channels like the OG Cartoon Network, PBS Kids, and Nickelodeon, I instead grew up watching stuff that aired on Teletoon, as well as other channels like YTV and CBC Kids. Because of this, the TV shows I watched were very different from most of you watching this video. I didn't grow up on cartoons like SpongeBob and Fairly OddParents. I grew up watching Johnny Test, Total Drama, and the 4 shows we're going to talk about in this Do You Remember episode: Detentionaire, Camp Lakebottom, Grojband, and Jimmy Two Shoes. I felt like these 4 shows were perfect for a Do You Remember episode, and at the end of the video, we can rank them from worst to best. So, without further ado, let's talk about some old Teletoon shows, starting with...
I don't wanna take the heat, no, now gotta...
Detentionaire aired back in 2011, and on the surface, it looks like the perfect show for teenagers, and while it can be entertaining in short bursts, honestly, this show isn't all that amazing looking back at it. It's not bad, but not as good as I remember it being when I was younger due to the batshit story that drags on for too long, the simple animation, and the hit and miss gags. Speaking of the story, it's insane. Why is it insane? Well, it's because the premise of the show starts off pretty simple on paper, with the 10th grader Lee Ping being framed for a giant school prank on the first day, leading to him getting a full year of detention, and every day he sneaks out of detention to figure out who truly caused the prank, and then it goes off the fucking rails with these underground tunnels, robots, lizard people, giant pyramids, like, what the fuck? Yeah, this show gets really crazy, and even though the mystery is cool at times, the pacing is pretty slow when it comes to the overarching plot, and it takes so long for anything major to pay off that you almost forget why Lee's in detention in the first place in the later seasons. And that's a big problem with a mystery show. The latter half of the show is so different from the first half that you wonder if you were even watching the same show. And the first couple of episodes feel pretty bland as a result, due to how chaotic and action-packed the later episodes get. Oh yeah, this show also has action that involves crystal lasers, and like... what is going on? According to Wikipedia, the creators of the show came up with the stories of Detentionaire from their experiences in high school, and I'm just here wondering what on earth did they see in school to come up with like 75% of the stuff seen in this show. Anyways, despite the story lacking focus sometimes and taking a while to get interesting, the cast of characters we get is pretty solid. I enjoy Lee, his best bud Cam is funny, Holger's weirdness is honestly quite entertaining with his dialogue and strange habits, and Bivy is probably my favorite character in the show alongside General Barrage. Also, I know people aren't a fan of Chaz Monteranian, but honestly, I feel the same way towards him as I do with a character like Chick Hicks from Cars. I like watching them because they're both entertaining, egotistical assholes. I don't know, sue me. Now, even though the characters were good, the humor on the other hand is the definition of hit or miss. Some jokes land while others just feel really awkward. And then the animation, while it does have a neat art style, making it look like a comic or graphic novel came to life, the actual movement of the characters and the backgrounds aren't that great. And that's because Detentionaire had a very small budget, so the visuals aren't the best for a reason. But still, I feel like the character animation, and especially the background characters, could have been done much better. And that to me is how I feel about Detentionaire revisiting it after all these years. It's a show that can be enjoying, but it also could have been better. The animation is basic, the characters are fun, but lack any consistent good jokes, and the main story feels bloated and confusing, resulting in a show that can be fun to look back on every now and then, but to me, it's a show that I'm not gonna binge. I wish I could like it more, but I just don't. There's too many issues I have with the show to call it anything better than just decent at best and mediocre at worst. I hope that didn't sound too harsh, but it's just how I feel about Detentionaire, and it's a bummer that I don't have more positive feelings towards it like some others do online. At least the voice acting is good.
Sup, Ping Prank Master? You gonna send us another email or what?
Wait, is that Chris McLean? Holy shit, it is him!
Yeah!
Camp Lakebottom is the newest show we're going to talk about in this episode of Do You Remember, since it premiered in 2013 and ran for 3 seasons and concluded in 2017. To me, this is the show that has the best looking animation out of the 4 Teletoon shows in this video. There is another cartoon that is right up there in terms of animation quality, but Camp Lakebottom looks great. It's highly expressive, the character designs for the most part are pretty solid, and the backgrounds are well drawn. And it does make sense why the visuals are so well done, since Camp Lakebottom was animated by Jam-Filled Entertainment, the same studio that animates The Loud House. And that'll be the first and last time I ever mention The Loud House on this channel. I am not going down that infamous rabbit hole that is the Loud House franchise and its fucked up fan base. Anyways, Camp Lakebottom also has a decent cast of characters with unique personalities and quirks. McGee, our main character, is a wild, reckless, yet fun lead. Gretchen is a decent tomboy character. Squirt is the goofball who doesn't get weirded out by many things. And then Sawyer the zombie, yes, there's a zombie at Camp Lakebottom, is very caring. Armand is a funny Sasquatch who's into the arts and crafts. And Rosebud is the hot-tempered chef who cooks very unsanitary food. Speaking of unsanitary, the main gimmick of Camp Lakebottom and the main story of the show as a whole is that McGee and his friends hop onto the wrong bus, and rather than going to this nice camp called Camp Sunny Smiles, they get sent to Lakebottom, which is this gross, rundown camp full of supernatural creatures, weird happenings, and much more. Speaking of Camp Sunny Smiles, there are 2 campers there named Susie and Jordan Buttsquat, yes, that's his actual name, and they're alright. Susie, who is McGee's sister, is the typical evil sister we've seen many times in other media, and Buttsquat is a solid antagonist who always tries to one-up McGee in any way that he can, usually failing in pretty much every episode. And on the topic of every episode, in most episodes, the plot revolves around McGee, Gretchen, and Squirt encountering something extreme at Camp Lakebottom, which causes havoc, and they have to find a way to solve the problem. Sometimes with the help of Sawyer and the others, and then Susie and Buttsquat either get in the way, cause the problem somehow, or aren't involved at all. And it's nice that the episode format isn't the exact same all the time. Not to mention that the humor and comedy is decent. There are some unnecessary gross out gags, but it's expected for Camp Lakebottom since the setting is unsettling. So the gross out humor could have been worse, all things considered. And the actual comedy, like the slapstick, certain lines of dialogue, and the delivery of some lines caught me by surprise in a good way. However, there is one big issue with the show, and that's the runtime. Each episode is only 11 minutes long, and that really hurts the pacing. Some of these stories could have been way funnier or creepier if they were allowed to breathe. Instead, everything is sped up, and by the time you're invested, the episode's over. Camp Lakebottom, I feel like, would have been much better if the episodes were 22 minutes long instead. But the short runtime isn't a deal breaker, just the show's biggest flaw. Overall, Camp Lakebottom is the Teletoon cartoon that I like, and it has its charm. Even though the runtime, pacing, and some jokes aren't amazing, the animation, cast of characters, unique stories, and main setting are intriguing enough for me to have a fun time watching the show. If you've never seen Camp Lakebottom, to me it doesn't hurt to give it a try. And hey, there's no harm in trying out the show since you'll never end up at Camp Lakebottom unlike McGee and his buddies. So, the next show we're going to talk about is Grojband, and I used to be obsessed with this show as a kid. I watched it all the time on the TV when it was airing, but does it still hold up today? Well, for the most part, yeah, but to me, this cartoon is just so hyperactive that it's kinda tough to get into because of that. I said that Camp Lakebottom's pacing was fast, but Grojband takes it to a whole new level. Every joke is rapid fire, the dialogue is quick, and on top of that, the formula of the show is pretty predictable. Every episode has the same structure. Corey and his bandmates have to come up with a new gig/song for the day, so they try to make Corey's older sister Trina super emotional to the point where she basically goes Super Saiyan and writes in her diary, and then Corey steals it so that he can use her written words as inspiration for the lyrics in the songs that they do in every episode. Also, there's a lot of running gags, and even though the gags themselves are funny, seeing them in every episode makes the whole show get old real fast, and that's not exactly ideal. Thankfully though, despite that, the other aspects of Grojband, which includes the band themselves, are quite enjoyable. Corey is entertaining due to how loud and energetic he is. Lainey is the most realistic character of them all, since she's the only one who's chill and logical 99% of the time. The brothers Kin and Khan play off each other well. And then Trina and her best friend Mina, I say best friend in air quotes since she basically tortures Mina every episode, are to me the highlights of the show. There's also Nick Mallory, who always talks in the first person, and he's so funny and likable. And then the last thing I want to talk about are the visuals and songs. The animation is decent, it's highly expressive, I like the character designs, and it's quite colorful. And then the songs are actually pretty good. Not all of them are bangers, but most of the music in this show is catchy, memorable, and fits the themes of each episode. I also like how every now and then, the instruments are different, that way every song isn't a rock song. See? That's how you make a show less formulaic. Do that for the actual structure of each episode story-wise, tone down the hyperactivity, and we might have ourselves a 9 out of 10 or even a 10 out of 10 cartoon. But even with my issues, the show we ended up getting isn't too bad. Grojband has solid animation, the music is decent, the premise on paper is creative, and the characters and jokes are enjoyable. And despite the formulaic plots and quick pacing, this cartoon ain't too bad. To me, it's the perfect show to watch in the background while I'm doing other stuff. And even though I wish it was better, the performance we got from Grojband was a decent 6 out of 10 in my eyes. Alright, that's 3 shows down, 1 left to go. And I've saved the best Teletoon show for last. And that show is... Yep, that's right. Out of all 4 shows we've talked about today, Jimmy Two Shoes is the best one to me. It's not flawless, but it's the kind of cartoon that I'm down to watch at any time, even after all these years. Everything from the world building to the premise, animation, humor, characters, dark tone, and more makes Jimmy Two Shoes a blast to watch. The whole series takes place in Miseryville, a town literally built on suffering and is ruled by Lucius Heinous VII, who wants to make his residents as miserable as possible. And yet, Jimmy is still super optimistic despite the hellish happenings going on around him. And if you're wondering why I said hellish, don't worry, we'll get back to that in a sec. But yeah, I really like the premise, and the episodes aren't formulaic. It's a very well-crafted show with a well-thought-out setting, and the comedy is great. Lots of funny expressions, good slapstick, and the edgier tone of the show makes the comedy a lot more violent and funny.
I'm tossing this stinkweed across town!
I can't see. Which one do you have?
Hey, Heloise.
Oh, him? Go for it.
I'm okay!
It also helps that we have a wonderful cast of characters. I already briefly talked about Jimmy and Lucius, and then Beezy is a very funny, dumb, and lazy best friend for Jimmy. Heloise is great. I really enjoy Sammy, and I like how he always wants to become a star, and yet Lucius always turns him down for saying so. Molotov is fantastic. Everyone is great. I don't think there's anyone I disliked in the whole cast. And the animation and voice acting is top notch. I love the dirty look of the backgrounds of Miseryville so that you can really tell this place is miserable alongside the skull and monster shaped buildings. The character designs have a lot of fun variety to them, and the actual character animation is very well done, which makes sense since this series was animated by Mercury Filmworks, who are nowadays the go-to animation studio for Disney shows. And then you've got some talented VAs on this show as well, including Tabitha St. Germain as Heloise, who also played Rarity and Princess Luna in My Little Pony. Speaking of other shows, I have seen some people compare Jimmy Two Shoes to SpongeBob SquarePants, and I can see why. Both shows have similarities, like how Beezy and Patrick are basically the same character. The character dynamics are about the same with some of the cast. Heck, even the realistic close-up shots every now and then are pulled right from SpongeBob. But even with the small similarities, the darker tone of Jimmy Two Shoes and the alterations to the characters make it feel different enough from SpongeBob to give it its own identity. Anyways, since I keep mentioning the darker tone of the show, I should also bring up the recently found pilot for Jimmy Two Shoes, which was originally lost media until this year in 2025. And as you can see, the pilot is very different from the final product. Heloise and some of the other characters looked a lot creepier. There's a lot more torture scenes, and it was way more obvious that this series took place in hell rather than Miseryville, with people literally falling out of the sky in the pilot. Even though they changed things so that it was less obvious that the show took place in hell, elements of that pilot are still in the final show, which is really cool to see. In fact, the reason Lucius is called Lucius is because it was a reference to Lucifer, aka the devil. So yeah, they weren't hiding anything. You see why this is my favorite cartoon out of the 4 I've talked about today? It has everything. Great and expressive animation and voice acting, hilarious characters and comedy, an edgy tone that adds to the humor and world building, and the premise and history of the show is very intriguing. Jimmy Two Shoes is just such an easy show for me to like, and I always love revisiting it every now and then. It's easily one of the most underrated cartoons of the 2010s in my opinion, and I'm glad that I had the chance to watch it when I was younger. And I'm also glad that I got to watch it again for this Do You Remember episode. Well, there you have it. That was episode 4 of Do You Remember, where we talked about 4 pretty solid Teletoon cartoons. I like how each one represents something different about the channel. Detentionaire tried to go big with its story and mysteries, Grojband leaned in on its formulaic stories and gag-driven comedy, Camp Lakebottom gave us a fun monster world, and Jimmy Two Shoes delivered sharp, consistent humor with a dark twist. But if there's one thing that all of these shows have in common, it's that they have a lot of voice actors that worked on the same shows. Since all of them were made under Teletoon's umbrella, many voice actors who worked for Teletoon worked on multiple Teletoon shows. For example, Brian Froud, who voices Beezy in Jimmy Two Shoes, also voices Sam in Total Drama, and then Chris McLean's VA appeared in Detentionaire, which I pointed out at the end of my Detentionaire segment, and he also voiced Party Danimal in Grojband. Mike from Total Drama's voice actor played Jimmy Two Shoes, and so on and so forth. I just find it very interesting to see how many voice actors all of these Teletoon shows share, and I think it's really cool to see. Anyways, with all of that said, that's all I've got for you in this episode of Do You Remember? So, what do you guys think of these 4 Teletoon shows? Did you ever watch them when you were kids? Were you a fan of them at all or not? Let me know down in the comments below. And, as always, make sure to leave a like, hit that subscribe button and notification bell to see more content from me, and I will see you all in the next video. See ya!